Okay, I want to start where I left off, so to speak, with libertarianism, because I just want to emphasize to you how really strange, truly, absolutely free will would have um, to be to say that we have, um, perfectly free will is to actually say something that's really kind of weird. And you can't overstate how really weird an absolute free will would be. You wind up positing the idea that at some point our will is our decisions are not influenced by something else. There's something within us that makes decisions that is not itself necessarily influenced by other things. It is a cause for other things to happen, but it is not directly or necessarily the effect of another cause. Or else then we would say the will is not free, right? This is an absolute, version of freedom here. So that would mean if the will can cause other things, but is not itself caused, then it is an uncaused cause. Okay. There's two places in philosophy we talk about an uncaused cause. One of them is talking about this idea of, a perfectly free will, independent of physical laws and so forth. And the other place is when we talk about arguments for the existence of God. There's a set of arguments, you may remember, hearing me talk about them, called the cosmological arguments, which are about where the cosmos kind of comes from. And it postulates the idea that for the universe to even be here and in the form that it is, requires that God exists. You know, at the very beginning of the universe, something had to cause the rest of the universe without itself being caused by something else. And that thing, of course, would have to be God. God is the only thing that could have such properties as to be able to, initiate the beginning of a universe without God being caused by something else. This, this is also just making me think about the School of Kalam argument. Okay, so the unmoved mover was the other idea I was thinking about. Something initiated the movement that takes place in the universe, and that thing could not itself be moved, but it had to be capable of initiating movement, right? The first thing to get the stars going and so forth. Some people think about it now, saying, well, something had to kick off the Big Bang. What was there before it? And people who are submitting the cosmological argument say that God is the only kind of thing that could have brought about that kind of event, brought the universe to be. So I guess that would make us mini gods if we were supposed to be, if we had perfectly free will. So it clearly seems to be the case that it at least consistent with the rest of our experience, it doesn't seem to be possible that our will could be so completely free in that way. Nevertheless, we need to be free enough. Okay. All right, so the next thing I want to look at is a philosopher by the name of David Hume. And he's going to be our example of the position that we call compatibilism or soft determinism, which is the idea that the universe itself is pretty much, determined and determinable and understandable, and everything follows chains of cause and effect. And people have will, and the will influences things, and the will is they're going to be agnostic about whether or not the will is itself an uncaused cause or if it is necessarily influenced by something else. They're just going to say, that's a problem for metaphysicians, and we're not going to get into that. What we're going to look at instead is what we can talk about, which is the influence of the will itself. Okay. This will hopefully make more sense as we go along. All right, so there's a lot to say about David Hume. I'm going to focus on just some particular few things about him. He was part of the Scottish Enlightenment. He was going to, he applied to be professor at Edinburgh, but they decided he, wasn't religious enough. He wrote a remarkable paper on miracles, if any of you might be interested, where he attempts to demonstrate that miracles are impossible. Which I guess is what makes them miracles. But anyway, he's got a definite perspective on that that's considered to be pretty good. He was known in his own time for writing, the definitive history of Britain. Everybody around his era, when they wanted to know something about the history of Britain, they went to David Hume's books. This allowed him to raise enough money to be able to do philosophy. He wrote two major works. There is a treatise. Good heavens, I've forgotten. And the inquiry into human reasoning, I think. We're looking at the inquiry, actually. That's what I asked you to read. David Hume, coming along with this idea of problems with causation that come into the problem of free will, David Hume has some problems with causation. And he identifies some problems that we have yet to overcome, and I'm not sure we ever will. David Hume was also extremely influential with regard to Immanuel Kant. Immanuel Kant said that David Hume woke him from his dogmatic slumber. He challenged Kant in a lot of ways. David Hume was an empiricist. He believed that all the information that we possess comes from our interactions with the world. And, that's pretty much it. And he also thought that our interactions he was a skeptic, right? He wanted to say that the only thing we really can talk about are the interactions that we have with the world, the impressions that we get from the world, and that those are really actually kind of limited. So, for instance, I go to the window to look outside to see if it's raining. Well, how do I know that what I'm seeing is rain or not rain? I associate, I have these sensory impressions of drops of water or, clear substances, drops of clear substances, maybe tapping onto the window and flowing down, seemingly falling from the sky. I can see things outside, looking shiny, and something clear just seems to be dripping off them. And I assume, based on previous experience, that's water, and therefore it is raining. But, the only information I really get is based on what my senses can see. And I think hopefully when we went into Descartes, talked a little bit about how many things we kind of put together to make our senses, to have our perceptual experiences. And I think I talked to you about how what you really see in a way is two-dimensional, images that are slightly offset from each other, this degree of parallax, and your mind interprets that, translates that effectively into a three-dimensional perspective. It's also, composed to a certain extent out of maybe even sound interactions where echoes are and so on. It gives us a sense of our space and place. So he wanted to say that there's really nothing we can assert without empiricism. He did believe that we can talk about, interactions of ideas, right? Relationships between ideas, but the ideas ultimately resulted from some kind of sensory impression and experience. So, fairly profound skeptic and empiricist. Okay, so, all right. This is a quote from his first work, A Treatise of Human Nature. That's what it's called. Of the understanding. There is nothing in any object, considered in itself, which can afford us a reason for drawing a conclusion beyond it, even after the observation of the frequent or constant conjunction of objects. We have no reason to draw any inference concerning any object beyond those of which we have had experience. So what he's talking about here is two things. One of them is, the nature of, we can't make any inferences past our sensory impressions and perceptions. The second thing he's talking about is something more problematic, which is the nature of causation itself. Let's see. How much time have I got? I think I'm going to pause here because I'm virtually certain I've used up all my time.